Hey there guys, Ian here, and today I'm bringing you another Cinema 4D and After Effects tutorial. This will probably be a bit longer than the average one, as this time I'm going to show you how to make an intro using Element 3D. So I made one a little while ago, last month, and this is kind of how it looked, and this is kind of what I'm going to show you how to make. So you'll get to know the lighting, the animation, and the glow and all that. So we'll just jump right in to Cinema 4D where we start. So for this you will probably want a logo of some sort. So I've got basically a circle, and with this I just took a 4-side spline and used the sweep NURBS to sweep around it, scaling it at the top and bottom, so you get this pretty cool shape which looks quite cool. And hopefully, I haven't tested this, but hopefully it works just the same as a normal logo. So if you don't want to deal with this and you just have, say, your logo is this, you can always just put it into an extrude NURBS, and this will do really for the animation. But in this tutorial I'm going to be using this logo, and I'll leave a download link in the description for this project file so you can follow along with this just to get the practice in if you want. So we're going to be using a plugin called NitroBlast for this, but there are three free alternatives online if you don't have it, but NitroBlast works pretty well, and so I'll be using it because I have it. So this is a menu for NitroBlast, and we want the NitroBlast main, which will pop this up. Now with our sweep NURBS selected, we want the quality on high, the pieces on about 50, and then small pieces we want 2, so that splits all the pieces up again, and we want this to be on about 5. And as for all of these settings, you can leave them the same. We don't need to remove any inside pieces, and we can just click fracture, and in the end you'll be left with a sweep NURBS, a fractured object which looks something like this. If I was to click play, it would fall down because there's dynamics, but we don't need to worry about any of that. So if we look into here, you can see we have in total 89 pieces, and this will do for our animation. So what you want to do is just, with the first one selected, hold down Alt, go to MoGraph and Fracture, and just select all the other pieces and drag them in. Holding down Alt makes it a parent of the object you've highlighted, so it just makes it a bit easier to organize. So you can just drag that out and delete the rest of the NitroBlast, so we're left with the pieces. You could use a free plugin to break it up and you'll be left with something similar to this. But yeah, as long as you can find a way to break your object into different pieces, you'll be fine. So with this, we can just click save. I'm going to save it as something new. So I'm going to make a new folder called E3D tutorial, and just save it as logo underscore E3D, that's element 3D, and then we're done with Cinema 4D. It doesn't matter about texturing it within there, as long as there are 2 different textures on each piece, it'll work fine. So we're just loading up After Effects now. It can take a little while, especially if you have quite a few plugins. The first thing we want to do is go to composition, new composition, and we'll make it for now 10 seconds long and 1280 by 720. Then we want layer, new, solid, and we'll name this element 3D. It's best to be organized down here. And with that, we want to go to Video Copilot and Element, drag it on. Of course, if you don't have Element 3D, then you won't be able to do this. So we can go to Scene Setup, Import, and go to the folder we saved it to and open the Cinema 4D file straight in. And you can see we have our logo, and if we go to wireframe mode, you can see it's broken up into all of these pieces, which is pretty cool. So you can also see we have two materials already on it, one for default in and default out, and this stands for the inside of the object and the outside. So you can see if we were to turn one off, we have the equivalent of the inside of the object. So what we want is the metal texture for the outside, which can be found if you have the Pro shaders. It can be found in metal, and I believe it is brushed metal dirty, and so just drag that onto the out, and you can see we have this texture on here. Making sure to go to the actual object here, changing it to box preserve aspect ratio, and changing the UV repeat up to something like 3. And you can click auto normals if you like, and it'll just sort a few minor errors up, and you can see we have this really detailed texture, and it looks great. So this is the outside of our texture, and then the inside we want a kind of glow material, and so we just want in the basic material, I believe it is illuminated, and you can just drag that on to the default in, and what we want to do is go down to, where is it? Oh, we want illumination on, and we just want to change the color of the diffuse, and this is going to be our kind of darkish red material, and then you just right click, copy, and copy that down to the illumination channel as well. And then with them both checked back on, we can just click OK, and we have it now in our scene. So the next thing we need to do is make a camera. So we can just go to right click anywhere down here, go new camera, and I'm going to keep this as a 35mm camera. And you can see it's the wrong way round, so we can go back into our scene with the object selected, and I believe it'll be flipping on the y-axis. Nope, maybe the x. There we go. So now it is lined up. So the basic animation for this, as this is assigned to group 1, we can go into the particle look, and if we change the multi-object to enable, we can actually play with the size of each individual piece. And this is pretty much the animation. Like, it's not very complicated at all. So we can play with the rotation and the rotation random, just like you could do using a random effector in Cinema 4D. And all you have to do really is keyframe this. So first thing we're going to do is make sure that the glow works. So we're going to actually go into our group 1 and change the size random to something where we'll be able to see this glow. So basically break it up a little bit, and pressing through C on the keyboard you can see the cursor changes, and this is your camera control really. So this is orbiting around, we've got our moving around and our zoom. So we want to kind of move in so we can see it, and I've accidentally moved that across. So somewhere like here will be fine. So we go to render settings, glow, and enable glow, you can see straight away we get our glow. So we can change this to kind of dark red, and you can change the opacity, the saturation, and anything you like until you kind of get a glow that you like. If it's too white, there's probably something with the material that you will want to set up differently. Potentially the specular color as well. You can change the shininess down all the way, and you can change your glow amount to whatever you like until you're happy with the results. Another thing for the lighting as well is try changing the environment. So one I like to use is Studio Blur, and this is what we'll be using here. So you can see we get some nice glow. Maybe the intensity radius needs playing with a little bit, but you can see this is pretty similar to what we had before, and it's basically up to you of how you want it to look. For now, in this tutorial, this will be fine. So Element 3D is very powerful. If it's going a bit slow for you as well, you can change the render mode to something like preview. Draft is more for working with camera angles, as there's no textures, not too much detail. Preview is very similar to full, so you can work very well in your preview window, and there's not as much latency. And full is what you put it on for your final render. In the actual render settings, there are several options. We've just gone through the glow. There's motion blur, which we'll come to in a little bit, depth of field, which we'll also look into. Ambient occlusion is something which is pretty useful just to turn on. It kind of fakes a bit of shadows just using ambient occlusion. If you've used Cinema 4D, you'll know kind of the difference it makes. You'll be able to see it if I zoom in here and flick it on and off. You can see right around here, if we disable it, you get some slight shadows. This isn't the perfect object to use it on, like to demonstrate, but it makes a subtle difference. Another thing we want to do is add additional lighting to make the scene a little bit more interesting. So under lighting, we can go to add lighting, and in this case we can use dark. You can use any of these, and also you can play with the brightness and also the rotation. So you can see this really brings out the glow in some places. So I quite like the highlight this gives around the edge. So we might want to kind of try and work with that somewhere like here. And you can also play with the brightness, and this will really bring out your logo. And you can also, within the environment channel, rotate the actual environment. So this is the main environment now, the studio, which you can move around. And what I like most about Element 3D is the fact that everything is rendered pretty much in real time. So this is the object that you will be seeing in the final render in pretty much full quality. So the next step now is pretty much setting up your cameras for this animation. So we have two angles followed by a kind of final overview, and the final overview is possibly the easiest one to set up to begin with, so that's what we'll do. So we'll call this camera end, and on the if we just click on the arrow down, and we'll just reset all the point of interest and position. So now we should be straight on to the logo, and this is the final angle we want. We just want to zoom out a little bit so we're somewhere like here. Make sure that we're on 6 seconds exactly. If we're working at 10 seconds, we're going to have 2 3-second kind of angles followed by a 4-second ending. So we just want to drag this down holding shift and it'll lock to that 6-second period. And so this is our final camera angle. And with element 3D selected, what we want to do is go to our group 1, go to rotation and find the one that just rotates it around this axis here. So we're going to start it at about 35 degrees, make a keyframe just by clicking the little stopwatch, going to the end and turning it to 0. So now we have a very basic animation where the camera begins of it rotating round. And at the same time that that's happening, what we want to do is change the size random from 17 down to 0. And then you get that kind of glow mixing in. What we're also going to do is play with the random rotation just a tiny bit. So maybe from 7 at 6 seconds down to 0 at the end. So we get this really faint glow, which looks pretty nice. For some reason we've actually lost a little piece on the edge. I believe this may just be a glitch, maybe with the texture. So it's important just to make sure, as for some reason the logo is occasionally playing up a little. So we'll just, there we go. You can see now it is working fine. The glow's looking nice. I think what I'm going to do is actually, in the rotation, just end a little bit early. So to look at all your keyframes for a certain layer, just select the layer and press U. And you can see here we have the Y rotation of the logo, the size random, and the random rotation. And what I'm going to do is just bring that rotation back a bit. And so now that the random rotation on all the bits ends before all the pieces come together. And I'm going to do just the same to the size random, so it does actually finish and you get an end animation like this, and it looks really nice. So the next thing to do is create another camera to try and get those different angles, but we don't want this, we don't want it rotating. We kind of want it at 0 here. So we want to have the Y rotation of the particle 1 frame back to the 0. So it'll jump back from there and go. So now it's straight on. We can add in a new camera, and this one will be called first, for first angle, and this will go until 3 seconds. So we'll just do that and drag it down. And so we have our 3-second camera, which we're just going to zoom in and rotate around, move around until we get an angle that we like. So somewhere around here will do. Again, being quite rushed with this, you can take as long as you like to find an angle. And I'm just going to zoom in, rotate around a little bit more, and somewhere like here will be fine. So in the animation I did, it starts off perfect and then you see these little gaps appearing. And so we're going to do the camera movement first. So bring down the little arrow, go to transform, and just make a keyframe on the point of interest and position. And then go to the 3 seconds and simply pan a little bit, and so we get this camera angle. Remember, you can always reverse this in post-production after you've rendered all this out. So I'm going to have it zooming in, and it's just going to break a tiny bit. So in Element 3D, we're going to change the size random to 0 and the rotation to 0. And you can see already we get these cracks forming, which is pretty much what we want straight away, but we don't want it to happen instantly. So we're actually just going to move these two keyframes forward a bit, and that way you can see we get these cracks forming, and we're actually going to displace them on the Z axis. So you can see if we're to do this, we get all the pieces kind of falling apart. We could also do the same with scatter, and in this case the scatter looks better. So on this same mark, we're going to make a keyframe on the scatter Z axis, and then at the end of here we're just going to have these slightly offset, so you can see we get these cracks forming. And we're also going to play with the rotation a little bit more. So at here, instead of 3, it'll be something more like 12. And this is the first camera angle done. Remember, you can always go back and change any of the keyframes again to anything you might like. You can use the actual animation engine within here to have one logo broken up and the other one fine, and then use the animation engine to actually get a kind of wipe animation. But in this case, this works fine, and this is what I was doing in my intro. So we're going to make another camera, not solid. We're going to make a new camera called second, and this one's going to start here and end here. Remember, holding down shift will lock it to the position there. So now we have one camera angle, and then this one, and then the final one. So the second camera angle is pretty much more the same as the first. We just want to find something we like. So try and avoid going to the same place more than once. So somewhere like here will do, and what I'm going to do is have it zoomed here and change the, we'll make a keyframe on both the point of interest and position. Make sure you're still in the same camera and just zoom out like so. And now we have a pretty basic camera angle, which we're going to mix up by using the Z rotation. So I'm going to make it -15 to begin with, and at the other keyframe I'm just going to zero it out. So now we get this very simple rotating camera, and you can see here we have pretty much the animation down. We're just going to now play with depth of field. So depth of field works very simply with Element 3D. All you have to do is turn it on in the camera. So what we do is go on the little drop down menu, camera options, depth of field, and straight away we get this depth, which is probably a little bit too far away. And the easiest way to know what's in focus and what's not is to go to the render settings, depth of field, and change the mode to focus indicator. So you can't see it yet, but it'll become apparent in a second when I bring this focus distance down, and you can start to see this red kind of fade come in, and this red bar indicates what's actually in focus. So we're going to start it around here, make a keyframe on the focus distance, and go to the end and make it something like so. And when you're vaguely happy or have an idea of what it might look like, so maybe it needs to move a bit further, a bit quicker, so maybe something like this. So it moves along. What we want to do is go to the depth of field mode and change it back to pixel blur. And now you can see we have a nice depth of field which we can tweak in here. So maybe we could change the aperture to something like 25 to give it more of a blur. And now we have something which looks a bit like this. If you don't want it to be cut off too soon, we could change it down to something like 10, but actually change the blur level to 200. And then you get a bit more in focus here. So this is beginning to look pretty nice. This depth of field is for the first angle, so we just need to do the same with the second two. So again, change it back to focus indicator and go to the second camera and turn depth of field on. And this one is going to start over here and it is going to end over here. So it's going to almost pull focus from one to the other, and I just want this to finish a little bit earlier. So we have it in focus here, going down and then appearing here before it ends to the next camera. And also the next camera should start there. So again, go back to Element 3D and change it to pixel blur and have a look at what's in focus and what's out of focus at the right time. So right here you can see looks really nice in the background. I'll put it up to full. You can see full takes a little bit longer and make it 100%. And you can see here we have really nice clear in focus logo here and really incredible depth of field rendered in real time almost in Element 3D. So sometimes your texture might not look particularly high res, and so you can always come back in here and change the UV repeat up to something like 5. And now we have an even higher resolution texture for our logo. So you can see now we have the depth of field sorted. The final one doesn't really have any on, so we can actually, when it starts, keyframe the depth of field from comp settings. In fact, we want to go here, make the keyframe here, and then the next frame we want it off. And what that's going to do is allow us to use depth of field with this camera, but it won't affect our logo, which is what we want. So the next thing we want to do is add some text, which will actually rotate along with the logo. So we want to go to new text and just type in whatever you like. So in this case, I'm going to use my name and make sure the paragraph is centered text. And with this, just make sure it only appears on the last section. We don't want it on any of the others, and I'm just going to make it white. Next thing to do is move it down, make sure it's aligned to the center, right click and make it a 3D layer. Again, just move it down here. So this is now with the camera, so we could move out and it'll track it with it. As the animation of the rotation here is moving with the camera, but the animation of the logo is within Element 3D. We do have to rotate this by hand. So we have the rotation at -35, at 35, and if we just go to transform, then it's a Y position at 35, or you could, in theory, alt click on the keyframe and simply link it up to this position here. And all that's doing is, I believe it's called a pick whip. You just drag it onto another attribute and it pretty much copies it. It's like using the parent here. And what that's just going to copy whatever number the rotation of the logo was with the rotation of the text. So that's one really quick and easy way to make sure it's all linked together, and we can move this up and down wherever we want, and it'll stick to it more or less perfectly. If I was to actually play with the rotation of here, you can see the text moves along with it. So that's a quick and easy tip to make sure two things move exactly the same effortlessly. So the only thing left to do now is color correct it, and in the animation I had these dots in the sky, and they are actually here as well. So that's using trapcode form. So again, new, solid, and I'm going to call it form. Search our effects for form and just drag it on. You'll see here that we have our box, and we're just going to make it 2000 by 2000 by 1000, and you should be able to see it here, and it's already being affected by depth of field, but it's not quite looking how we want it to look. We want the particles to be about 7 in the X, Y, and Z, so there's not quite as many. And in the particle, we want the size random up, and just play with the opacity random as well, just so you get something that you like. And this is an easy way to kind of add particles into your scene without any trouble at all. And just play with the disperse amount just so they're not so uniformly distributed. You might not be able to see them a lot with depth of field, but they are there. You can turn depth of field off if you wanted. So here is without, and here is with. Also, you can turn motion blur on, just so it moves with, kind of gives motion blur with the motion of the camera. And the same can go for Element 3D. We can turn motion blur on, and that will just give it a bit of motion. So this final scene, the lighting is exactly how we want, and this scene's pretty good as well, but this scene is a little bit dull, so we're just going to brighten the lighting up by rotating it around. So in this scene, we want the lighting all keyframed at this point, but in this one we just want to play with it until we get something a little more interesting. So it just means rotating hopefully just the additional lighting, and find one that boosts it up. It might be the actual environment we need to change, so again, go back to the other one and change the rotation, keyframe the rotation and go back, and you can then this is a little bit more like what we want. If we bring that back and then play with some of the other rotations, do we get something a little more dramatic? And again, this is all down to personal choice. There's no right or wrong way, but something like this is just a little more interesting. So you have a kind of light shine on it, and then when we go to the other ones, it is how it was before. In the final scene as well, due to the text being added on, it looks like there's more space at the top than the bottom. So we can actually make a keyframe on this frame under world transform and world position. And then in the second one, just play with the world coordinates and simply move it up a little bit. So it's in the same place until this one. And again, we can just move that text up a little bit, just so it looks more centered overall. Finally, we have the color correction, and that's on an adjustment layer. So right click, new adjustment layer, and this will be called CC for color correction. And we're just going to put a tint on, a curves, and an exposure, and a letterbox. This is a plugin by Magic Bullet, and it simply adds a letterbox to it to whatever aspect ratio you want. In this case, we want 2.1 or something like that, just for the bars at the top and bottom. And then to begin with, we want the to play with the tint, and this is where you can make it grayscale if you want, or the original color. I like to just bring it down a tiny bit to something like 12%, and it kind of just brings down how vivid it is. And then under the curves, I'm just going to bring it up a little bit. With Element 3D, it's important to have a background on as well. So I'm just going to make a background layer quickly and drag it beneath everything. So now we have the background, and we're just going to play with the curves, making a simple S shape to give it a bit more contrast, and play with all of the adjustments. With the exposure, I'm going to make the offset 0.01 or even 0.005, and just change the gamma correction down a tiny bit until we get something a bit like this. And that's almost us done with the color correction. I'm just going to add another plugin called Misfire Grain underneath the letterbox, changing the red, green and blue to 10% each, turn off color noise and the amount down to something like 10% as well, so 10, 10, 10, 10, and that just adds a bit of grain. And if there are any banding issues with any of the color corrections, then the grain kind of mucks it all around and makes it slightly more choppy, which in the end gives a slightly more natural look. So again, this is a basic setup for Element 3D. You can always change the angle to try and get rid of any slightly more rigid edges. So I'm going to change it to something like 60 and that'll be fine. If we want to change the texture, the inside color, then it's as simple as simply just changing the color here, copying this, and pasting it in the illumination channel, and now it is a blue inside, which doesn't look quite as nice, so we'll go back to our red. And this is the basics of creating the intro in Element 3D. It's gone on for 40 minutes, and what we have is a pretty nice intro, which I shall render out and add a bit of sound so you can get an idea of what the final result will be before and after the tutorial. And so yeah, I hope this has been useful for all of you. I got some good feedback on the actual intro I did, so I thought I'd make a tutorial for it. I hope you've liked it, learned something, and yeah, have a lovely day everyone.